This episode is brought to you by Paycor, the HR and payroll software made for leaders. It's never been harder to recruit, hire, and engage workers. That's why HR leaders and frontline managers depend on Paycor for all things people management, from onboarding and performance reviews to compensation and benefits. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
Empire.
Welcome to a live stream edition of my podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget you can follow my podcast wherever you get them, Apple, Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, of course you are right now because it's a live stream, but hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. And as you can see, I have my pal Nicki Jhabvala here from the Washington Post. We survived. We had a few scuffles out there today. The reporter getting into it out of the joint practices. So, I'm just happy. You should have seen Nicki was brawling with some of those Ravens reporters. I'm pretty proud of you, Nicki. Anyway, we want to wrap up those 2 days of joint practices because I think it was a lot of good work. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes with that, answer some questions, call it a day, hopefully inform you more than you were before this podcast. Nicki, I do want to start at quarterback, and not going to make a big deal out of this because it's not a big deal. Sam Howell's going to start. We know that. It's just that Ron Rivera was asked today, are you ready to name him? He's not ready to name him. They're going to go back and meet. He's going to talk to Eric Bieniemy, Tavita Pritchard. They're going to name him on Friday. That's the right. I mean, that's
Ron cares deeply about sports talk radio and wants to give them something to talk about. So there you go.
There you go.
Like every year he said they'll have a quarterback competition, and every year they do not have a quarterback competition.
Right. And I don't think right. And have you seen any reason? If you anoint Sam as the guy going in, has he provided any reason to not be the guy? And here's the other thing: we know that they had pegged these 2 days as a key measuring stick for him as well. The Browns preseason game, but these two practices, have you seen any reason to think that he wouldn't be the guy?
No. And frankly, I mean, I say this in all fairness to Jacoby because he's gotten almost no first team reps. He got like 1 day of it and that's it. But I still think Sam Howell has been the better quarterback at practices. So on that part alone, I think he starts, but also he was pegged as a starter like in January. So he's starting. Like it's not even a debate whether Ron wants to say it now officially or ever. He's starting. And he has shown growth in my mind. I think, Ron said it and I agree with him. But he looked poised back there. He looks confident in the pocket, which I think is, 70% of it for a young quarterback. Just having that confidence.
Right. And I think you see that, and you're right. And I think that's always the thing that jumped out with him is poise, confidence, and just the playmaking. Now, I will say, like I talked about him yesterday on my podcast, so I don't need to go over all of yesterday and my quick impression today. And I want to get how you felt he did over these 2 days. There were a couple plays today. There were one or two series where the offense had a couple tough plays, but I think there were times, and there was one series that we were watching, and the D line looked like it was going about 75% with the rush, and it kind of came after some of the chippiness.
Yeah, I think they knew what they were doing there.
Right, and so because both sides were doing that, both D lines for Washington and Baltimore, but the defensive backs, the back seven, were going full. So you still got to make some throws, and there were still a couple plays, even in that one, where Sam, what I like is he knows how to get out where to leave the pocket when he goes. Yeah. And there was one throw where he starts to leave it. It's like kind of like almost starts to sprint out to his right as if he's going to run, but he keeps his eyes upfield. And then I think it was base flashes and boom, he goes. And there was another throw that I really like from him, which shows what they like is that quick twitch throwing ability. And there was one where I think Terry, you remember this one, Terry coming across the middle, first reads over to the right. As soon as he sees him, that ball's coming out. That's when they talk about quick twitch arm talent. That's what they mean by see it go.
Right.
He's not saying, oh, should I? It's like, boom, there it is, go. So those were some of the plays. And, I like his mobility. That's obvious for anybody. So anyways, I'm curious
I agree with you. I think, and we have a good comparison. And sorry, Carson Wentz, but we saw what could happen. It was a different offense, obviously, but we saw what could happen if you hold on to it a second too long. And you don't see that obviously with Sam. Now it's a different offense. There's an emphasis on the quick game, but I think he really is showing what you want in a quarterback. It hasn't been perfect, but he is showing that quick decision making, and working through his progressions. The one thing I always look for, just because I've seen it so many times with younger quarterbacks, especially mobile ones, is they go through one read and instead of working through the progression, they just tuck it and run with it. And you don't see that from him. When he runs, it's with intent. And it's the right decision. Usually it's not a crutch. And I think that's incredibly promising.
No, I think that's a good point, because I've seen those quarterbacks here in the past. And, even in 7-on-7, they would end up tucking and running way too often. And with Howell and Jacoby, that's a last resort. And, because Jacoby's not really a scrambler, but Sam could be more if he wanted to be, but he does. I think you're right. He uses it with the intent to usually get out of the pocket and keep his eyes upfield. And that's some of the stuff that I like with him. And he had some good throws here, but again, like what I would say for him, he doesn't look overmatched. Like I've seen guys like who have been drafted in these low 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. He doesn't look like them. And I know, like, we all know where he was projected and where and all that, but the bottom line is this is where he went. He doesn't look like those other guys I've seen. And so that's why I think he's got a chance. But someone else brought up here, Blaine, who joined on the live stream, said a young QB is going to, I'll put it up here, going to make mistakes. Demeanor is everything. I think that's one of his strengths. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, you go back to, when the kids always played when he's younger, right? And so you have to have a level of poise to do that. And they really like that. The bigger question I would have is the O-line. What did you think about them over the last couple of days?
There were good moments, of course. There were some questionable moments where you just happen to see a lineman get run over or somehow laying on the ground. To me, it's a concern. It's a concern not just with the starters at times. It's primarily with the depth. And this team, every year, their depth has been tested. Be it at center, tackle, wherever. And I'm not even sure they have a full serviceable second unit, to be honest with you. They have been trying Ricky Stromberg at guard, which I feel like they should have been doing that earlier just to get him more work. But yeah, it's a concern. And I don't know how you can really upgrade it at that point. Yeah, the guys are going to come on the waiver wire in a couple weeks when rosters are formed, but those are guys that other teams felt weren't good enough to make their roster. I
agree. Like the question I have with the depth is it could be very inexperienced. Now, Cornelius Lucas, feel good about. I think Larson, because right now, and the whole reason they're putting Stromberg at guard is to see, can he do it in a pinch in a game? And when I watched him over here over the last couple of days, I don't think he looks, I think he looks okay there. Like he looks somewhat comfortable, looks like he has awareness, looks like he knows what he's doing and he's playing, good technique and all that. But what we don't know is if what more can you do there? Because can you get out in space and do that? He really just has to do it in a pinch. So right now I'd put Tyler Larson ahead of him because he can do that. So he's at least experienced at center. But the other concern is that Sadiq Charles had to leave practice today after he was working early, but has that calf, and that's the knock on him. And if he can't, like if something happens with him, then Chris Paul has to start. Now you're even more inexperienced on the line, or unless you go out and find a veteran after cuts or something like that. Or if you keep like a guy like Aaron Montero, who, if you're looking at who are the best linemen in camp, of the backups, he'd be on there, probably, right? So, or some of those younger guys. But
I was gonna pull up their draft picks over the years. I know Sadiq was what, fourth,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If Sadiq can't last, and he's good when he's in there. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
his base, his legs, his calves have
His
like
calf
nice-
muscles. Yeah. Johnny Drama would be very envious of his calf muscles for any Entourage fans.
But when you think about it, you think about the linemen they've drafted over the years. 2020, Keith Ishmael no longer on the roster. Sadiq Charles, if he can't stay in, he's moved all around the line, but he can't stay healthy. Sam Cosme has been a regular. They moved him inside.
I think he looks good there too. I'm fairly optimistic about him.
Yeah, and Chris Paul is young and developing, but the 2 linemen they drafted this year, if Ricky could turn into a good player, but he's not going to start immediately. And we don't really know where and how much he'll play this season. And Braden Daniels doesn't look close to being ready. So if Sadiq can't stay healthy, those are 3, 4th round or higher picks to the O-line over the last 3 years that are just not usable right now, which is that's not ideal, obviously.
Right. It's not ideal. And I think
where you build the draft is where you build the line. And if you're not able to use these guys and really develop them and keep them, then
it's the number one thing that, they haven't gotten that right yet. It's a new group. They're still working together. So I get that. And I do think like Chris Paul, I like he plays with some power. He had some good blocks the other day against the Browns. I think there are some times in this practice. Now, for him, it's going to be, does he have, can he get out in space and the screens, things like that. And, we will have to see that. But I do think he can help you in the run game. I'll tell you what, and this is where the line can be helped is, and they did it against the Browns, and I think Howe's legs, but moving the pocket a little bit, things like that. In the run game, I got to tell you, a guy that I really, really have started to like is Alex Armah as a fullback. And
my God.
that dude is physical. I was watching him in the one-on-one. So they'll do, for people listening, they do like all these one-on-one periods, and you have it's a blitz period. So the linebackers are rushing and the backs and tight ends have to get them. Then they reverse and then the backs go off for pass. So one guy who really struggled there was Brian Robinson going against Roquan Smith, but that's the kind of guy you're going to go against. Struggled with him in the blitz against in the pass situation, got him. But Armah,
Roquan Smith isn't your typical linebacker.
That's the guy you've got to block. Listen.
But he's one of the best of the best. He is.
I agree.
One of my favorite inside linebackers.
So in a game, are you just gonna say, "Well, that's okay. That's okay, Brian"?
No, but you're
are you gonna say that?
You have to block the best of the best, or you can't.
I understand. I get it, but the bottom line is that was a guy he's matched up against, and he's going to be matched up against. And I think there've been other times he's been fine there. I think he's going to have a good year. But Armah in that was very physical. And then just there was a pulling play he had today where he's pulling and he takes out he gets the DN. Doesn't drive him out, but he stops him and the run goes through right behind him. So he's a guy that can help. Do you think there's a spot for him on this roster?
Yeah, if Logan's still iffy, absolutely. The thing I really like about him is he's versatile. There was a day, it was not last week, it might have been the week before. I think it was the first week that Logan was out with a calf injury, but they had him taking reps at the U position. And he was catching, he was probably their most efficient tight end that day in practice. They had him running routes, catching balls. He looked good. And that could give him roster flexibility, not just position flexibility. So
right.
Because they're going to need to keep, at least 4 tight ends, and he could kind of be that 4th, but also give you the versatility of being a fullback, which would help a ton.
Right. And I think if you have a guy like Bates at tight end as a blocker, so in certain run situations, you have 2 extra good blockers on the field for you. Because I still think a guy like Cole Turner, who's improved in that, but not always in the way that they may want to use these guys. Hodges, I think, still developing there. So I think it gives you some flexibility in the run game to improve the run game. And by the way, somebody asked about Stromberg Stromberg's making the roster. This isn't about I think that kid. I think in a year or two, to me, he's got to get a little bit stronger to really kind of fully develop as an NFL player. But I like what he offers in as he's getting stronger, right? I think his base is good. I think his awareness is good. I think so. I don't worry about him. I just think it's if all goes well, he's not going to play.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
So do you come away from these couple days more concerned, less concerned about the line?
I'd say it's about the same, honestly, because it was up and down. It's been up and down in regular practices. It was nice to see them go against another line, but that, like anything, requires some context. Like you mentioned, there's some periods where it wasn't a full speed rush. I think the one-on-ones are interesting. They're entertaining. I don't think they're always, a direct reflection of how good the line can be. Some players are better in the one-on-ones. Right. Some players
it's also made to beat the line because it's a pass rush drill.
Right. I mean, I want to see them in the preseason game. I hope they get a full quarter again. We'll see. But I would really like to see if they've taken any strides. I mean, it's still the depth for me. I think Wiley will be as good as he can be at tackle and kind of fix some of the technique things that were holding him up literally against the Browns, but it's still the depth.
Right. And by the way, Hermit Robb says here, because we're talking about tight ends, and that Bates is looking good. And I agree. As a blocker, he looks really good.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing, and you and I were talking about this today about like Cole Turner, the one question I would have, I don't always like to use the word concern because that just jumps to a different level, but he had the ball stripped against the Browns. He had a ball stripped the other day. Then there was a contested catch situation today where he wasn't able to bring it in. That, it's one of those where that's where Logan Thomas excels. So I think Cole Turner runs good routes and gets open, but I think in those tight areas, is he going to be as consistent, not just getting open or getting to the ball or making himself big, but then securing it.
Yeah. The strength at the catch point is huge. And I just, Logan, and you mentioned this, that, Logan Thomas is built like a power forward, but he can run through people a little bit like a linebacker at times. He is a large human being, but he's also a very smart player too, having played quarterback. Now it's, on the other side of it as a tight end. I think if one of my biggest takeaways over these last couple days is that they really, really do need Logan Thomas. I mean, they have some young guys that are still developing. I like what Bates has shown. I think he's tried to really make himself more of a complete tight end, but they still really need Logan Thomas.
Agreed.
And need him to stay healthy.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away. Specifically, the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
This episode is brought to you by Paycor. Paycor empowers leaders to build winning teams. With Paycor, leaders can recruit, onboard and train employees, set goals, and drive performance. If you're a leader, everyone depends on you. Who do leaders depend on? Paycor. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
There is still time for one more family adventure this summer. The country's largest climbing and zipline park is open 7 days a week until Labor Day, with 8 different levels, 16 courses, 250 climbing obstacles, and over 4,000 feet of zip lines. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring, located in Montgomery County, Maryland, is the perfect place to spend the last few days of summer. Once you're back on the ground, head over to Axe Throwing and try one of their brand new games. You can play Battleship, Blackjack, throw at traditional targets, or even upload your own images. They are now accepting group and family reservations for this fall. Can't make it out before school is back in session? Not to worry. The Adventure Park is open Friday through Sunday every weekend this fall. To end the summer right, listeners of this show can now get $10 off any ticket by entering the promo code KEIM23DC at checkout. That's KEIM, K-E-I-M 23DC at checkout. There's still time to get outside and join the adventure at theadventurepark.com. Right, so let's get to a couple of, what are some of the other things that stood out to you about these couple of days?
I still like their secondary. It was good to see Emmanuel Forbes go against some top receivers too, with Zay Flowers, OBJ. He had a good first day. Maybe not as successful the second day. But again, these one-on-ones, a lot of them, it can favor the offense at times. But he did get beat a couple times there. And that's, again, it's to be expected. He's a rookie. He looks really freaking good as a rookie, but he's a rookie. But I like the pieces they have back there still. I thought their defensive line, since Chase Young wasn't doing any team drills, their rotation there, and I think is really interesting because you kind of get a glimpse of where they're using people and how they view certain people. And I think it's really interesting that James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill weren't the immediate fill-ins at defensive end like they were last year for Chase Young. Instead, it was Efe Obada the first day, and today we saw Andre Johnson get a number of reps with the first team. So I think that's interesting. It kind of shows how they're viewing where certain players fit in best.
And there was one series where Toohill got the reps first at right end, and then Andre Jones did get it. And that's a guy, like, we talked to him afterwards. You guys talked to him a little bit longer than I did, but he's someone
who's a likable dude.
Why don't you go fill us in on that? Like, he is very likable.
Yeah. No, I just think he's one of those that it's very apparent immediately that he just wants to learn. He's a sponge out there. Like, he's out there praising his coaches for coaching him. Like,
and Kerrigan,
and I how can you not like a player like that wants to put in the work, that wants to get better? He's a physical freak. He knows it too.
He does.
But I just thought it was very entertaining, very personable. Seems like he's getting more and more comfortable out there. So yeah, I think there's a ton of potential there, and he's come on at the right time. Hopefully it continues and he follows that upward path in the season. I think
they'd have a real hard time putting him on the practice squad because I think you'd lose him because he's shown enough. And he hasn't been this Pro Bowl, but he's just flashed more. KJ Henry's a different kind of rusher. KJ Henry's a little bit more power. Yeah. Whereas Jones has more flash to his game, and flash is going to draw the attention. And, but you're right. He was talking about Ryan Kerrigan, how much he picks his brain, and during drills or whatever, he really listens to him because he said he's a legend. And I'm going to point out something else out, Nicki, that you may not have known. He has a tattoo on his left arm that says Dream Chaser. Dream Chaser. So there you go. But I like that. Listen, it's
getting that.
It's the mindset.
He's going to get it at the end of the season.
I'm all about mindset, baby.
He got it. He got it when the team was officially sold.
And then Angela Rowe wants to know how the linebackers look. Does Cleek look as good as he did in the spring? My own take, and I'll get yours in a second. I think Cody Barton at times flashes, and at times I'm not sure. And there were a couple of runs against the Browns where he's going behind the play and led to some runs. There were a couple of times in coverage in the 2 days. And I'll be honest, it was hard to watch offense and defense. And I stuck a lot with the offense because that's where a lot of the questions are, right? And so, but there are a couple of times you see Cody. So it's hard for me to judge his 2 days fully. I do think that Jamin is progressing. And I think they seem to be more excited. They seem to be excited about him as much as anybody at that position. I think Hudson, with the key still is there. Can he be that extra back? And where's Mayo in that? Mayo will be on the roster, special teams, run defender. And then will they keep a fifth one? But anyway, I think, and one little thing on Davis that I want to point out, and do you remember that big play he allowed? I think it was last year where the route over the middle to the back. It's like, how are they on him? So I wanted to point out a route that he defended against the Browns the other day where, remember that little out route on the first series?
Yeah.
Played it perfect. He took away the middle, and the offense wants the middle. So they're willing to give up that 5, but he played it right. And I wanted to point it out because last year he played it wrong, and this year played. But anyways, so what do you think, Nicki? How have they looked to you?
Yeah, I mean, I still think their best linebacker is Cam Curl. But
There you go.
I mean that jokingly, but also not jokingly. I look for body language in the linebackers. Like, I still feel like they're the weakest link on their defense. And that's partly because they have a really strong starting line and are now a really deep secondary. I do like what Cody Barton has shown. I mean, I don't think he's going to be an all-pro linebacker by any means, but I do like what he's shown back there. He looks faster than maybe I was expecting. And I agree with you that Jamin has shown some progress. I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me was after today's practice, he was like doing sprints with Jack Del Rio. And Jack Del Rio was giving him a hug and telling him good job. And so was Steve Russ, the linebackers coach. So they are noticing. I mean, and Jack Del Rio has publicly been one of his critics which he hasn't done for other players. And so to see that, I thought was pretty telling. What
you don't know is that after you guys left, I went back out and did some sprints too. So, nobody was hugging me. I do it away from the cameras. So just
doesn't
so
count if it's not caught on camera.
Well, let me turn off my phone. So, all right, Wayne Irwin wants to know, how has Chris Rodriguez Jr. looked this week? So I like what I've seen from him.
I do.
And I think
not
he doesn't.
Because I wrote about him.
Well, okay, you can plug that story in a minute.
Sorry,
but what I like about him is that the way he runs, just a style of runner. He's always going forward, and I saw him with some good runs this week with that, where he knows how to get through the hole, and some of those holes have been pretty good for him. But he's breaking arm tackles because of how he runs, and at the end of his runs, it's always forward, shoulders forward. That's lean. I like that. And I think he also catches the ball better than and he always likes to point out, I'm catching it better than people thought. And I think he's right, because he didn't have to do it at Kentucky. But again, you apparently wrote a Pulitzer winning prize about him, story about him. So go ahead. What do you think? What do you think about him?
No, I think he's looked good. The vision, I think, and I don't like the comparisons to Antonio Gibson, because you notice it in running backs that have been running backs for, most of their life. I think Antonio Gibson, the transition from receiver, you don't just acquire the vision you need for the running back position overnight. But you see it in Chris Rodriguez, just in, like you mentioned, the way he's able to find his lanes and sometimes create lanes. I think he's a powerful little thing. He's not huge. He's not Jared Patterson, but he's a powerful little thing.
Yeah.
I like him. I think there's a ton of potential there.
Steve Moody says this is the best depth we've had on D in a very long time. So I think the D line has some solid depth. Now, the questions I have there, because I still think they're still sorting through that defensive end position. And, I think there was this assumption, James Smith-Williams, Casey Toohill, but the way they've rotated guys, the work they've got that they were getting late in that Browns game and on special teams makes you like, okay, maybe this is more of a competition than you thought. And so what's going to happen there? But then it's like, well, who are you have Fedarian Mathis. He's got the calf injury. We both saw him in that walking boot in Baltimore. And then Ridgeway, who's coming off the triceps, but he's got the, if you had to drop a nose tackle, I always say, if you had to drop a nose tackle and said, just draw me a picture of a nose tackle, there's a good chance it's going to look like John Ridgeway.
Yeah, or a WWE wrestler.
Right. A WWE wrestler, right. He is 1,000% going to be one after he's done. But he, I think, so I like the depth there. I do like the potential for the depth there. And, secondary, I love the depth. Love it. Yeah. Linebacker, I don't know that they have the depth. But I think, and my take on Davis has been what I said earlier, but if you're playing behind this line and this is your third year now, big things should be expected from you. And so, this is made for you to have with that line, with your speed and skill, you should have a big year. But do you agree with this is the best depth? What do you think? How would you rate it?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I thought in 2020 they had pretty good depth. When Ryan Kerrigan is a backup, I don't care if he had one good leg or not. When Ryan Kerrigan is your backup, yeah, you got good depth. Yeah, I do think they have good depth. I like their interior still better than the edge. I think Montez Sweat is due for a monster season.
Yeah.
He's just wrecking things out there.
He looks good.
My concern is more of, and I know depth we're talking about this season currently, but what does the future look like at this position? They're all going to be free agents. That's a concern. And if they're still kind of figuring out the pieces behind them, what does that say about the coach's belief about that group?
Well, I also wonder, how badly do they want to make sure they have guys under contract for next year, just in terms of affordability concerns for let's say like Montez, I agree with you. Montez has looked good. Yeah. Montez always looks good in the summer. And I think he plays well, but I think we've been waiting for that year for him for a couple of years now.
To have a Duran type of year and just finish.
Yeah. But I also, I think for him, he just, again, the word is finish. If he can get just a little bit more help from that secondary, and as they say, hand in hand, right? Hand in hand. But with the ability to disguise the coverages, that's where the secondary and versatility and depth comes in.
Yeah.
And help him get home and get that, because the guy always looks good. And he plays well during the season. He's just got to finish. So I think it potentially could be really, really good depth. I think of the secondary is the best depth they've had, because the safety position has a lot of depth.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
What's up? It's Kaylee Cuoco. When it comes to travel, we all have a happy place. I just went to my happy place. I just went to Maui, and it was truly amazing. Priceline has always been about getting you to your happy place for a happy price, with deals you really can't find anywhere else. Like up to 60% off select hotels in Costa Rica, or 5-star hotels for 2-star prices in Cabo.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Scotty A wants to know, what do you know about Joe Gibbs' role and span of influence with the new ownership group? I know he talked to Josh and they said he was an advisor. He's not going to really have a role here other than probably as a sounding board if they need it. Is that your understanding?
Yeah. I mean, he's a good friend of Josh Harris's at this point, grew up a fan of Gibbs. So yeah, he's there. I think he seeks his input on some things, but it's not like a formalized role or anything like that. In fact, I think it's actually the opposite, that Josh Harris has more of a role in Joe Gibbs' racing company than this. Yeah. So.
And I think it's more like, I'm sure if there is a decision to be made on certain positions within the front office or whatever, that he would call Gibbs and say, what do you think? I'm sure he would do that.
But Ron has done that. They've kind of done that already. So, yeah.
So, Tim wants to know, how did the Commanders defense do at containing a mobile QB? So in these workouts, like, you're really not going to see that. Like, Lamar Jackson he knows he can run. They know he can run. He wants to work on his throwing. And one thing I always give Lamar credit, not one thing, one of the things is he really has worked himself into a better passer. Yeah. And I think you do that through the way they approach practice. Again, I didn't see enough of the defense to say that, but I didn't see a lot of times where we look it up and say, oh, there's Lamar doing his thing, because that's not going to help their offense grow. And they have good receivers. And going back to the Forbes thing, I thought it was good for him to work against a receiver like Beckham, a different style, bigger, even more physical. There were a couple times where he was beaten. A couple of times I saw him recover because of his speed and his length, and he broke up a couple plays with that. But there was, I'd say, probably a rookie corner going against some veteran receivers. So but as far as containing a mobile quarterback, that's not the thing. And here's the other thing. those quarterbacks, that the mobile guys that hurt this team, pretty much usually hurt every team. You know, Lamar Jackson's legs are going to be a threat to every team in the NFL.
Well, Daniel, are we counting Daniel Jones in this?
Okay, so that's right. That one is
mobile quarterback, yet he always seems to tear up the Commanders.
Some of that is just it's a blown assignment more than it is just getting hurt by a mobile quarterback. Where it's play your, the guy runs his own read. Kind of look for it, man. But what I think where this team can help itself, it goes back to the defensive back versatility. You can, let's say they're playing the Ravens in a game, you can go to that 4-1-6 front. So you have 6 DBs in there who can run. You could go to 7 defensive backs with Curl and Quan Martin, the ability to play up in the box, or Derek Forrest up in the box, and do it that way. Now, you can.
They have been playing more dime. I feel like they were, at least in the first couple of weeks of camp, they were going a lot of dime. Although Curl was pretty much a linebacker in that role, but if we're counting him as a safety, then it was a dime.
Yes. Okay. So Angela wants to know how Andrew Wiley did against the Baltimore defensive front. Up and down. I mean, there were,
I'd say, but
yeah. And I think because with him, a lot of the issues are footwork. And when you see him, the oversetting, I didn't see as much of the oversetting, but I wasn't watching him every play. So if there was some of that, I wasn't seeing it, but I did see him. He lost a couple reps. And there were a couple of times where I'm like, okay, he handled his own. So kind of, to me, that's kind of who he is. And I think the other thing for him is how much are they going to chip for him? There are a couple of times, and you see the backs practicing that a lot. Like they'll practice going to chip and then going out for a pass. And I think we'll see that to help him. And I think let me ask you this, I think the run game can be solid.
I think so too. I think it should be solid.
Yes.
I'm curious how much they're going to use AG in space, but I think the run game can and should be solid. I mean, I think Brian Robinson looks good out there.
Good a lot.
He's slimmed down a little bit, which I think is very noticeable, but
he looks quick through the hole.
Very quick and decisive.
Yeah.
So I think they can be quite good.
And that's where if you again, assuming they keep Alex Arma, then you have the fullback who can block. And Bieniemy, I think in Kansas City, I want to say they used a fullback 60 some times last year. However, they have Patrick Mahomes.
That much.
I remember seeing the snap count
for them this year. They've said that they're going to.
Right. And I think when you have Mahomes, you may not need to use the fullback because you can throw the ball a little bit more. Right. So here, if they know hey, you're going to have to run to really control this for them and put the defense in a good spot, et cetera, that's where Arma and then John Bates comes in as good run, help in the run game. Yeah. And then can Arma help in the pass game? And again, the pass pro was good in the one-on-ones. I mean, so, but yeah, I don't have as much concerns with their run game as I do with, are they going to give enough time? And then the scheme is going to have to help with that as well.
Right.
So let me see what let me ask you this too. Is there anybody else that any of the other young guys that have materialized for you or, let me ask you, Jahan Dotson.
I was just thinking that. Does he qualify? I mean, he's a first round pick.
He's a young guy. And I think
he's done better. I think he's one of the most, I think he's a beautiful route runner, graceful. He just kind of glides. And he can, the top of his routes, we've talked about this many times at practice, he can just, the ways in which he can just create separation is just, it's kind of cool to watch, to be honest. Hope I'm not fangirling over here, but it's fun to watch the guy. And I think he could be a huge piece of this offense. Huge.
Right.
Yeah.
And I put this up there. Jim says, who do you think should play in the slot? Well, that's Jahan.
Yes.
So period. Yes. End of discussion. And that guy is going to be really dangerous. The other guy too, I think there's a couple of young guys and they're not, because when we start to get to final cuts and all that, but Kaz Allen, Mason Brooks, those guys who a lot of people were talking about early in camp still look like they have a ways to go.
Yes.
Like, what have you seen from, especially like Kaz in particular?
Yeah. I mean, I think the early appeal, especially with Kaz, is the returnability. He's small, he's fast, and he's done the returns, and they had him take all the returns against the Browns. But I don't know that you can use him regularly on offense. His routes need work.
Yeah.
Not a reliable catcher. Yeah. For most, and they got like probably a handful of guys who are fighting for that last spot or two at receiver. I mean, there's not. They're in, like you said, they're in that position because they're not fully developed or not a full, like a complete guy who can contribute on special teams as well as offense. I mean, the one I think has the most promise, and this is just my opinion, just I'm watching this, I really like Mitchell Tinsley because I like his route running. I like his reliability and catching the ball. How much he contributes on special teams, that's going to be the big factor. And that's going to be the deciding factor for that last spot at receiver.
It will be. And I mean, you were the first one to go talk to Tinsley after that game against the Browns. So, I know that's your guy, but he has done a nice job. And he does show up in a lot of practices where, he had a couple plays today where it's like nice. The one thing I do wonder on special teams, and I saw them working as a gunner, and there was a double team that he struggled to get through, certainly not a death sentence, and it was just one rep, but you wonder, like, is that, how do they see him on, is that a role they see from him in special teams, or do they see him in a different role? And you want to see where else he can fit there, because that it will make the difference without a doubt. But he's a guy that kid will be here one way or another. I do believe, because so just about two more questions here and we'll go. After the hoopla around EB style of coaching, have you noticed any change? No,
he's
not going to change.
He said it. He is who he is. And I think, I mean, I talked to somebody who played for him in college today. And he said the same thing. Yes, it takes some adjustment, but he praised Evie. There were times where, he didn't love getting the hard coaching, but that's what he needed. And it helped him tremendously. And to this day, he still talks to him regularly. And this is what Bieniemy said, and this is what you can see on the practice field, that, Bieniemy is also the first one to really praise guys when they do well. You can hear his voice. Yeah. It's loud. You know where EB is at all times, and he will get on them about every little thing. And it's, to keep them accountable, to help them focus on the details, to remind them that every little thing counts. He makes them finish their runs all the way to the end zone, because even if they stop at the 2-yard line, well, those 2 yards could be the difference in a game. And I think that's important for this group, who has come close, but not, gotten over that hurdle many times in recent years. So, but he does seem like the coach that genuinely cares about his guys. And I've heard that from literally everybody I've talked to who's played for him, is, he's one of the first ones that will be there if you need something. Correct. So,
Adrian Peterson loved him. Yeah. Adrian Peterson loved him, and absolutely loved him. And, he hasn't, nor should he change, because if you start to change, then it's like, then you're not doing who you are. You hired this guy. They knew what he was like. I don't think Rivera is complaining about it. I think he just brought up in a way, and I don't want to rehash all that stuff, but he's not going to change. I think one thing that they seem to be excited about is they feel like the offense is now has been buying in to to how he is. And I think, so no, he's not going to change, nor should he. And, let me say this, for somebody who, if whatever players don't want it, then do better, because then if you guys, if they've been better, then EB's not here. So, but the guy cares about coaching. Some guys, like, he genuinely seems to want to make you better. And if you take that approach, then you can look at it in a different light and say, okay, that's all this is about. That's all it's about. So, Dave Shockey wants to know, big picture, are you more or less optimistic about the team after the last 2 days?
I'd say the same. I'd say, probably the better. I'd say probably the better question is, do I feel better about the team now versus the start of camp? And I'd say, yeah, I think they have come a long ways. The 2 days alone, these practices, they're so limited in what they show because they don't want to, they know the practice is being streamed. They know fans are filming. They got another team looking over their shoulder right there. They're not going to lay everything out there of what they can do. So what we're seeing is pretty limited, and there are times where they're not going full speed. So you have to take that into context. But I think on the whole, from what we've seen since the start of camp, yeah, they have looked better. There's still weaknesses, absolutely. The line is still a concern for me. But I like what I've seen from Sam Howell. Hasn't been perfect, but you can't expect it to be either, for somebody who's played one NFL game and is transitioning to a system that's wholly unlike anything he played in college.
Except for at least the RPO part is the same, but
the
yes,
RPO part,
but the system itself,
calling all of that, like
correct,
that is a
right.
lot. So yeah, I'd say I'm more encouraged and more optimistic, but I still feel like there's a ways to go to get to where they want to be.
Right, and I think I feel okay about them, right? And because there's still the line, will the line be good enough? And I don't know. We have to see more, and we don't know. Like, we still don't know how the game planning and the scheme and the play calling will affect all of that, because it can. And then the quick game, that's going to be a big part. How is that going to help them? Because Howell does that very well. So, but it's funny because I feel okay with Howell. My question with him would be, will he get the necessary time to develop to be the kind of player that I think he might be able to be? And that's, that comes down to situation. Are they getting off to a good start? I think they're more positioned for a good start because of the kind of camp they've had, which goes back to, and some of this is, I give Ron credit, is going outside a comfort zone, getting a guy like EB, and then letting him really kind of adapt or tweak their practices, and they've been more intense. And I think this team sorely needed that, badly. And I think that's been a good development. And when you have a tougher camp, typically it should pay. You would think it pay off, but we'll see.
I think a lot of these guys are probably in the best shape they've ever been going into a season.
I am.
I am not.
Okay, but I do think, I like the defense. And somebody brought up like Montez Sweat going against Wiley in practices. Maybe that's the reason. We don't know. Like that maybe that is, but Wiley is whatever anybody thinks, he is a starting tackle in the league, whether it's here or somewhere else, or starting lineman in the league. Others may have McGuard, but I still think Montez Sweat looks good. Anyway, so I feel okay. I certainly don't feel worse about him. Nothing has given me that. No. And it's more just, there are some questions. And again, with the offense, at what point does it click for Howell, for the line, for the offense in general? Because it does take time. And is the defense going to start fast, which they need in order to get off to a good start? So just, man, if they
just stole my pun. I'm very upset about it. Dave Shockey just stole my pun about Wiley. He's a Wiley veteran.
All right. There you go. And I'm going to have to end on that dad joke, because that's where we go there. Anyway, Nicki, thanks for joining me. Thanks for sticking around for so long and answering all these questions. And thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll be back on Friday with another practice report, because they get back to practice Friday. Ron Rivera is going to talk to me before practice that day. So Nicki, get there early. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.